Buckingham Palace is on the edge. Doctors just confirmed what no royal fan wanted to hear: King Charles's health is spiraling fast. But in the face of this crisis, Prince William has done the unthinkable. A final decision that will not only change his father's fate, but could shake the very core of the monarchy. Why now? What is Prince William risking? And how does this affect Harry and Meghan? The answers are shocking, and they begin here. The British monarchy, once a symbol of enduring stability, now teeters on the edge of a silent implosion. For centuries, the crown has weathered scandal, war, and betrayal, emerging each time with its mystique intact. But today, it faces a threat unlike any it has seen before, not from politics, not from rebellion, but from within. At the center of this gathering storm is King Charles III, a man burdened by history, expectations, and a body that's beginning to fail him. What was meant to be a dignified continuation of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy has instead become a race against time, and fate is not playing fair. Behind the stoic smiles and regal appearances lies a chilling reality. Charles, once the tireless heir-in-waiting, now fights a private war with his own health. The news broke quietly. Almost reluctantly, doctors confirmed complications linked to a cancer diagnosis. At first, palace sources denied the severity, suggesting routine care and rest. But whispers grew louder, and those closest to the crown knew the truth. The king was not well. Hospitalization followed. The carefully controlled royal facade began to crack. What should have been a private medical matter evolved into a national crisis, one the palace could no longer contain. In the vacuum of official statements, speculation flooded in. Was Charles fit to rule? Would he abdicate? Would Prince William step in? The British press walked a tightrope between loyalty and truth, but royal insiders were less restrained. Leaks spilled into headlines, concerns mount over King's health, palace in panic mode. He's not stepping back, but he's struggling. These weren't just tabloid fabrications, they were warning signs, and they were coming from within. Behind the walls of Buckingham Palace, anxiety simmered. Every scheduled event, every cancelled appearance, every change in tone from palace aides became a signal dissected by royal watchers and insiders alike. Charles's physical presence may have remained, but questions swirled about his capacity to lead in the shadows of illness. The monarchy, already shaken by years of scandal and division, now faced the most fragile of foundations: the looming absence of its head. What the public didn't see was the desperation inside the royal machine. Tradition mandates resilience, but this crisis demanded something more: adaptability, speed, and contingency. The institution that had once clung to the past now found itself grappling with an uncertain future. And in that uncertainty, power began to shift. Eyes turned not only toward the king, but toward the heir. Prince William, long seen as the future of the monarchy, was no longer waiting in the wings. The crown might still rest on his father's head, but the decisions, those shaping the monarchy's survival, were already inching into William's hands. And as the palace tries to keep calm on the surface, behind closed doors, Prince William is preparing for the impossible. He wasn't just stepping up as the heir. Prince William was already drafting plans for the crown's survival. In the eyes of the public, he remained the poised, reliable face of a new royal generation. But behind palace doors, William was transforming into something far more formidable. He was no longer merely preparing to inherit the throne. He was preparing to defend it. The moment his father's health began to falter, something in William shifted. Gone was the patient, protocol-bound prince. In his place stood a man who understood, perhaps for the first time, that duty wasn't something you waited for, it was something you seized when the kingdom called. The news of King Charles's illness wasn't just a personal blow, it was a constitutional earthquake. Doctors spoke in cautious tones, but William read between the lines. He recognized the fragility of the moment. And with that awareness came urgency. Quietly, deliberately, he began inserting himself into conversations he once observed from the sidelines. His presence in weekly briefings with senior advisors became more frequent. his questions sharper, his tone firmer. The palace, long a fortress of rigid tradition, was quietly adjusting to a new rhythm, one dictated by a son who was no longer willing to be silent. William's strategy unfolded not in grand declarations, but in subtle shifts, an emergency briefing here, a last-minute scheduling change there. He began holding closed-door meetings with constitutional experts and senior courtiers. Discussions that once centered on ceremonial events now veered toward succession protocols, contingency planning, and crisis communication strategies. Few outside the inner circle knew the full extent of these preparations, but within those marble halls, the message was clear. William was laying the groundwork not just for a transition, but for a transformation. What made his actions all the more striking was the emotional tightrope he walked. He wasn't just preparing for a future monarch's role, he was preparing for the possible loss of his father. Every decision was layered with tension, a clash between loyalty and leadership. Could he remain the devoted son while simultaneously positioning himself as the nation's next stabilizing force? It was a brutal emotional paradox, and it weighed heavily. Yet, there was no room for hesitation. The stakes were simply too high. The monarchy wasn't just under threat from illness, it was under threat from irrelevance. William knew that if he didn't act now, he might be forced to react later. And by then, it could be too late. Still, even as he took control of the kingdom's quiet pulse, William understood that the survival of the monarchy hinged on more than just strategy and succession. The fractures within the royal family ran deep. The House of Windsor was bleeding from internal wounds, and one name divisive, controversial, and emotionally charged was still echoing through the corridors. But William wasn't just saving the monarchy alone. He was about to make a move that would bring back the most controversial royal of all. After years of silence and exile, Prince Harry is preparing for a royal return with one mission: see his father before it's too late. The moment the news of King Charles's hospitalization reached California, it shattered something inside Harry that he thought he'd buried. Distance, resentment, and public disgrace had built a wall around him, but none of that mattered now. This wasn't about institutions or reputations anymore. It was about blood. It was about time, what little of it might remain. And it was about a father who, despite everything, still held a piece of Harry's fractured heart. Insiders close to the Duke of Sussex describe his reaction as shaken and deeply emotional. There were no political calculations, no PR tactics, just raw, human fear. For a man so often portrayed as the rebel, the outsider, Harry's first instinct was not rebellion, but reunion. He reportedly told close confidants that he had to get back to the UK, that he couldn't live with himself if his father slipped away before they had a chance to talk. Not for the press, not for the crown, but for closure. And beneath it all, perhaps redemption. Sources reveal that Harry's guilt is weighing on him like never before. The interviews, the books, the accusations, they came with a cost. And while he's never publicly walked back his truth, he's now grappling with the pain it left behind. For all the drama that surrounded his departure, one thing has remained constant. Harry still loves his father. And the thought of Charles battling illness without him there has torn open old wounds. "It's breaking his heart," one insider whispered. The man once branded a traitor now carries the quiet burden of a son desperate to heal, if not forget. But this wasn't a simple decision. Because with every plan to return came the shadow of the past and the presence of Meghan Markle. According to sources, Meghan's stance remains firm. She has very serious reservations about re-entering the royal spotlight, especially under such emotionally charged conditions. The wounds from their split with the firm haven't healed, and the prospect of walking back into the lion's den where judgment lingers in every corridor was never something she was eager to face again. This time, it wasn't about holding Harry back. It was about self-preservation. Still, Harry's resolve hasn't faltered. If Meghan won't go, he'll go alone. He knows the family is divided. He knows his presence may not be welcomed by everyone. But that doesn't matter now. This isn't about protocol. It's about showing up. For his father. For himself. For Whatever sliver of peace can still be salvaged. Yet the moment his return became known, it stirred something deeper. Old conflicts began to reawaken. Grudges resurfaced. And just as Harry prepared to take the most emotional step of his life, the palace began to brace for something even greater. Because Harry's return wasn't just about family, it was triggering tensions within the palace that no one could contain. Even as Harry prepares to fly home, Meghan remains caught between personal pain and royal politics. To the outside world, her silence is deafening. But behind closed doors, she is locked in an emotional tug-of-war between protecting her peace and supporting her husband in what may be the most vulnerable moment of his life. The pressure isn't just internal, it's everywhere. The whispers, the headlines, the relentless scrutiny, every move she makes becomes ammunition. And in this fragile moment of potential reconciliation, she knows one thing for certain. Her presence could set off a chain reaction no one is ready to handle. Meghan's reservations aren't born from indifference. They stem from experience. She remembers what it felt like to stand beneath those palace walls, smiling for cameras while quietly unraveling inside. The feeling of being dissected by a nation, blamed for fractures she didn't create, vilified in tabloids that rarely offered her the dignity of truth. And now, with King Charles's health crisis thrusting the family into the spotlight once more, the stakes have only grown higher. Sources close to her confirm she has very serious reservations about stepping back into that world, even temporarily. This isn't just about attending a vigil or a reunion, it's about reopening wounds that barely healed. The fear is real, not just for herself, but for what her presence could mean. A single photo, a single glare, a single awkward moment could derail the delicate path toward peace that Harry is desperately trying to walk. Her absence might raise eyebrows, but her presence could ignite a firestorm. Meghan is painfully aware of that. And so are those inside the palace. Quietly, some courtiers hope she stays away. Not out of malice, but because they believe her presence would only escalate tensions that are already near boiling. There is a cold calculus at play. Reconciliation might have a better shot if it's carried out without her. But Meghan's absence carries its own weight. It casts a long shadow over Harry's return, highlighting the very division they once tried to escape together. The symbolism is impossible to ignore. A husband standing alone while his wife remains across the ocean, it speaks volumes. It undermines the image of unity. It reminds everyone that while one half of the couple may be seeking resolution, the other half is still battling the ghosts of royal betrayal. And perhaps, deep down, Meghan fears that her return wouldn't just stir the press, it might reawaken parts of Harry's past that she worked so hard to help him escape. Still, the decision appears made. Harry is going back. Meghan is staying behind. And the story is far from over. Because while all eyes are fixed on the Duke's solo return, the world is about to be blindsided by a move no one expected. With Meghan on the sidelines and Harry returning, the royal family braced itself because King Charles wasn't done making headlines either. Against doctors' orders, King Charles boards a plane to Italy. The world watches, stunned. Is this courage or recklessness? In a moment that defied logic and medical advice, the monarch made a decision that sent shockwaves through the press, his family, and the very institution he's sworn to protect. It wasn't just a diplomatic trip, it was a message. Charles wasn't going to slow down, not for illness, not for fear, and certainly not for whispers of abdication. But beneath the polished itinerary and tightly controlled press statements, there was a sense of urgency, almost desperation. This wasn't just another royal visit. It felt like a farewell tour disguised as duty. The trip lasted 4 days, but the implications echoed far beyond. King Charles became the first British monarch to address Italy's joint parliament, a symbolic move that many saw as an attempt to affirm his reign amid growing concerns about his health. But it didn't go unnoticed that he canceled his scheduled meeting with Pope Francis, citing medical limitations. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. A man healthy enough to address a nation's lawmakers, yet too fragile to meet the head of the Catholic Church. That single cancellation reignited questions the palace had fought to suppress. Just how serious is the king's condition? Behind the diplomatic smiles and scheduled handshakes, the public couldn't help but notice something strange about the timing. Amid his crumbling health and a family barely holding itself together, why insist on such a high-profile tour? Some believed it was meant to project strength. Others feared it was a veiled act of defiance, a king refusing to step back, even if it meant collapsing on foreign soil. And through it all, Queen Camilla stood by his side, visibly supportive but, according to insiders, deeply frustrated. This trip also marked their 20th wedding anniversary. But rather than a celebration behind palace walls, they were paraded before flashing cameras and relentless scrutiny. If there was ever a moment to rest, this was it. And yet, rest was the one thing Charles refused to consider. Doctors had advised at least 2 months of recovery, 2 months away from public life, 2 months to rebuild strength, recalibrate priorities, and prepare for what could be the most critical years of his reign. But Charles ignored it, not out of arrogance, but out of fear, because stepping away meant handing over control. And with Prince William already being seen as the quiet shadow of succession, Charles wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not while he could still stand. Not while there were speeches to give and crowns to defend. The monarchy wasn't crumbling in his absence, it was beginning to reshape itself without him, and he could feel it. But while Charles kept marching forward, another story was bubbling under the surface. His work obsession was becoming his worst enemy. Doctors warned him to slow down. His family begged him to rest. But King Charles couldn't. Stop his addiction to duty runs deep. For most, work is a responsibility. For Charles, it's a compulsion. A relentless pursuit of purpose so deeply ingrained in his being that even illness couldn't loosen its grip. After being discharged from the hospital, instead of easing back into royal life, he launched into it with an intensity that startled even his closest advisors. 18 public engagements in just 10 days, an unforgiving pace for any man. Let alone one recovering from a serious medical condition, it wasn't resilience, it was denial dressed as devotion. Those who know him best call it puritanical, a work ethic shaped not only by upbringing, but by a lifelong fear of seeming unworthy. For decades, Charles waited in the shadow of a queen whose stoicism defined an era. And when the crown finally became his, he refused to show even the slightest sign of weakness. In his mind, to rest was to retreat. To pause was to invite speculation. So he pushed forward, even as his body pushed back. The schedule grew tighter, the appearances more frequent, and the moments of recovery disappeared altogether. There was no time for stillness, no space to breathe, only the ever-ticking clock of royal obligation. Behind palace walls, Queen Camilla was reaching a breaking point. Insiders say she pleaded with Charles to reduce his workload, urging him to prioritize his health and family. But he wouldn't hear it. Her frustration was mounting, not just as a wife, but as a partner watching a man she loves crumble beneath the weight of duty. Every missed opportunity to rest was a risk. Every ignored warning brought them closer to the unthinkable. Yet Charles dismissed concern with the same stoic resolve he'd worn for decades. The kingdom needed him, or so he believed. What he didn't see, or perhaps refused to see, was that by trying to hold everything together, he was quietly letting everything else fall apart. There was no contingency planning, no detailed strategy for succession if his health failed suddenly. The structure around him remained fragile, stretched thin by denial and pride. The irony was devastating. A king obsessed with protecting the throne might be the very reason it was left exposed. And now, the toll was becoming too great to ignore. Charles wasn't leading with strength, he was surviving on fumes. The monarchy didn't need a martyr. It needed a leader who could last. And so, with his father driving himself to the edge, Prince William made the boldest decision of his life. With time running out and tensions running high, Prince William knew there was no turning back. The moment to act had arrived, not as a prince waiting in the shadows, but as a future king. Stepping into the harsh light of crisis, He wasn't just responding to his father's failing health. He was responding to a monarchy that was drifting silently, dangerously toward uncertainty. For William, this wasn't just a moment of duty. It was a reckoning, a choice that would define not only his legacy, but the survival of the crown itself. And in that quiet, calculated moment, he made his final decision. The palace didn't announce it, and there was no official statement. But those close to the royal machine felt it instantly. William had begun assuming more public-facing responsibilities, slowly but unmistakably shifting the center of gravity within the monarchy. Speeches once delivered by Charles were suddenly delegated. Foreign dignitaries met with William first. He was no longer just the face of the next generation, he was becoming the voice of the present. And behind those subtle moves was a far greater plan. One not born of ambition, but of necessity. Within the palace walls, internal reorganization was already underway. Royal aides were being reassigned, roles reshuffled, schedules adjusted without explanation. The message was clear to those who understood the language of power. A soft transition had begun. And at the center of it all was William, not as a son filling in for his father, but as a leader rehearsing for the throne. There was no drama, no declaration, just deliberate, strategic movement. And it was this restraint, this quiet certainty, that made the shift feel even more monumental. For the first time, the world saw a glimpse of William not as the grieving son or dutiful heir, but as the monarch he was destined to become. Composed, relentless, focused not just on image, but on impact. He wasn't simply trying to preserve the monarchy, he was preparing to reshape it. And according to palace insiders, he was doing so with full awareness that the final call could come at any moment. One source admitted he's actively preparing, just in case. Not in panic, in readiness. Because William understood what few others could admit, that time, tradition, and sentiment could no longer be trusted to protect the monarchy. Only action could. But this decision, this quiet but decisive rise, was not without consequence. It triggered a shift in royal dynamics that no one could ignore. Authority was being redistributed. Allegiances tested. The balance of power had tilted, and those who once held sway were beginning to feel it slip from their hands. Not everyone welcomed the change. Not everyone agreed with it. But no one could stop it. William had made his move, and in doing so, he stepped beyond the title of heir and into the role of ruler in waiting. But will this move unite a broken royal family or tear it further apart? One family, one crown, and a storm brewing on all sides. The question is, can they survive it together? The House of Windsor stands at a precipice, caught between history and transformation, duty and disillusionment. The public watches not with awe, but with suspicion. Decades of reverence have given way to relentless scrutiny. Every move, every silence, every fracture is magnified. And now, with King Charles's health in question and Prince William quietly assuming the mantle of leadership, the very future of the monarchy hangs in a delicate, wavering balance. Public opinion is more divided than ever. On one side, a tide of sympathy surges for a family clearly under immense pressure. A sick king, a dutiful son, a prodigal prince wrestling with guilt. But on the other, a louder chorus of criticism grows, questioning the relevance of a royal institution built on pageantry in a time of crisis. Can a family so fractured still serve as a symbol of national unity? Or has the mystique that once held the monarchy above the fray finally begun to erode? The answer isn't clear, but the consequences of failing to adapt are becoming more visible. By the day, King Charles, once a symbol of resilience, now represents vulnerability. His determination to press forward no matter the cost has drawn both admiration and concern. Behind his defiant public schedule lies a quiet truth. He is no longer the monarch of tomorrow. He is the monarch of now, clinging to a reign shadowed by fragility. And that reality has thrust Prince William into the role of reluctant frontrunner. navigating not just a family crisis, but the expectations of an entire nation. Every step he takes forward is loaded with meaning, signaling not only his personal growth, but a kingdom on the cusp of inevitable change. Then there's Harry, the unpredictable variable. His return may bring reconciliation or reignite old tensions. His position remains unclear, his future within the monarchy uncertain. Will he be welcomed back as a bridge to healing, or remain a symbol of division? Only time will tell, but his presence, whether temporary or permanent, will echo loudly across the palace walls. The choices he makes now, and the response they provoke, will determine whether the monarchy begins to mend or fracture further. What happens next won't just impact the royals, it will redefine them. The coming months carry the weight of transformation, and the stakes have never been higher. The monarchy may survive, but not without scars. Power is shifting. Trust is fragile, and the illusion of control is slipping through royal fingers faster than anyone expected. And as history turns a new page, all eyes are on Prince William, because this time, there's no going back. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.